In June 1944, the Pacific Ocean shimmered like glass, calm and endless, but beneath that quiet surface, the fate of two empires was about to be decided. For years, Japan's Navy had ruled these waters with confidence. Their pilots were among the most feared in the world, trained to perfection and proud of their dominance. The rising sun emblem painted on their planes had once struck terror into the hearts of American sailors. But as the war dragged on, the tide was turning, and no one on either side could see how close that change really was. The U.S. Navy was moving westward, island by island, closer to Japan's doorstep. Their next target, the Mariana Islands, would bring them within bombing range of Tokyo itself. To the Japanese, losing the Marianas would be unthinkable. To the Americans, capturing them was the key to ending the war. Both sides knew this battle would be different. It wouldn't be fought in trenches or cities. It would be decided by the sea and the sky. On June 18, 1944, Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the U.S. Fifth Fleet, received word that Japanese forces were on the move. Hundreds of enemy aircraft were preparing to strike from distant carriers. Spruance didn't flinch. He knew his men were ready. They had trained for this moment for years. American pilots now flew newer, faster planes, equipped with radar, better armor, and superior range. But even then, no one truly understood what was about to happen. At dawn, the first wave of Japanese planes took off from their carriers, roaring into the humid sky. Their mission? Destroy the American fleet before it reached the Marianas. The Japanese still believed they had the upper hand. Their commanders were confident, convinced their veteran pilots could crush any opposition. But they were wrong. Many of their best men had been lost in earlier battles. Now, inexperienced pilots filled the ranks, flying outdated aircraft that could barely match the new Hellcats. As the radar screens on U.S. ships lit up with enemy blips, American pilots prepared for takeoff. The deck crews worked in a frenzy, loading ammunition, refueling fighters, and guiding them down the narrow decks. Within minutes, dozens of F-6 FH Hellcats thundered into the sky. The Americans called it the Big Blue Blanket, hundreds of planes forming a defensive wall across the Pacific. The first clashes began high above the waves. The Japanese dove from the sun, guns blazing, but their attacks were met with disciplined bursts of American fire. Within minutes, Japanese aircraft began falling like burning comets, spiraling into the sea. The American pilots, better trained and better equipped, tore through the enemy formation. Radio chatter crackled with calm confidence. "Splash 10, one pilot reported, then another, and another. Down below, sailors watched as flaming wrecks hit the water, their shock slowly turning to realization. The Japanese Air Force wasn't invincible anymore. For every American plane lost, 10 Japanese went down. One pilot, Ensign Robert Bob Dixon, shot down 5 enemy planes in a single mission. When he returned to his carrier, his words echoed across the fleet. "How about that? This is a turkey shoot." The nickname stuck. From that day, history would remember the battle as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But the fight wasn't over. Late that afternoon, waves of Japanese bombers tried to reach the U.S. carriers. Many never made it. Anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with fire. The ocean seemed to tremble with explosions. Each ship was surrounded by smoke and noise, yet the American fleet held firm. Out of hundreds of Japanese planes sent into battle, only a handful returned. As night fell, Admiral Mark Michener made a daring decision. He ordered a night strike, something almost unheard of in carrier warfare. Hundreds of American planes launched into the darkness, flying toward the retreating Japanese fleet. The black sky was alive with roaring engines, tracer rounds, and flashes of flak. Some pilots never came back. Others, low on fuel, ditched in the sea, guided home only by the faint lights of their carriers. When the exhausted survivors landed, Michener gave a rare order. He told the crew to turn on every light aboard the carriers to help the returning flyers find their way. It was a risky move, but it saved dozens of lives that night. By dawn, the outcome was clear. The Japanese had lost over 400 aircraft and 3 carriers. Their once mighty naval air force was shattered beyond repair. The Americans, by contrast, had lost only a fraction of their planes. The Pacific had a new ruler. The victory wasn't just about numbers, it was about the shift in power, the moment when Japan's empire began to crumble. The airmen who survived knew they had witnessed history. Many of them had seen the face of death, yet felt pride knowing they had done something far greater than themselves. In the days that followed, the American fleet pressed forward. The Marianas fell, and soon B-29 bombers began launching raids directly on Japan. The war's final phase had begun. For Japan, the Battle of the Philippine Sea marked the end of their dream of dominance. For America, it marked the beginning of inevitable victory. Few people today remember the name of the battle, but its consequences shaped the end of World War II. It was the day Japan lost control of the skies, the day the Pacific began to close in on them. As one pilot later said, "We didn't know it then, but that was the day Japan's wings were broken." And just like that, in a battle that lasted less than 48 hours, the empire that once ruled the Pacific lost the one thing it could never replace: its air power. The ocean that had once carried Japan's ambitions now carried their defeat. That day, under the blue Pacific sky, the world changed forever.
As the smoke cleared over the Philippine Sea, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. Sailors and pilots, exhausted yet alert, scanned the horizon for any sign of retreating enemy ships. The Japanese fleet, once a formidable force, was in chaos. Their carriers, the pride of their navy, were burning or sunk. Hundreds of planes that had once filled the skies with menace now floated lifelessly in the water, their pilots lost forever. Even seasoned commanders stared at the wreckage, stunned at the speed with which the tide had turned. Captain James "Jim" Harlow, a young pilot aboard the USS Lexington, leaned against the railing, staring at the endless blue waves. He had flown multiple sorties that day, firing at enemy aircraft, dodging flak, and guiding damaged comrades back to safety. For hours, adrenaline had kept him alive, but now his body shook with exhaustion. Around him, sailors spoke in hushed tones, their voices carrying both relief and awe. They knew they had witnessed something unprecedented: the near total annihilation of Japan's naval air power in a single, decisive engagement. On land, intelligence officers pieced together the battle's outcome. Reports flooded in: 3 Japanese carriers destroyed, hundreds of planes lost, and the remnants of Japan's naval air force effectively crippled. Analysts realized that the Pacific War's trajectory had changed irrevocably. The United States now held the skies, and the enemy's ability to launch counterattacks was severely diminished. It was a victory so complete that it felt almost surreal. Meanwhile, back at the flight decks, crews tended to their planes and each other. Mechanics worked tirelessly, repairing damaged aircraft and preparing them for the next wave of operations. Pilots shared stories of narrow escapes, heroic maneuvers, and comrades lost. Amidst the chatter, one recurring phrase surfaced: "It was a turkey shoot." The nickname, first uttered in the heat of combat, had stuck. Yet beneath the humor lay a somber recognition. The human cost had been staggering. Each plane lost represented lives, families, and dreams cut short, and every survivor carried the weight of what they had seen. Across the Pacific, Japanese commanders regrouped, but hope was dwindling. Their elite pilots, once invincible, had been decimated. Replacements lacked experience, and morale was at an all-time low. The sense of invulnerability that had carried them through the early years of the war was gone. Even in Tokyo, the emperor's advisors acknowledged the grim reality. The empire could no longer challenge American air supremacy. The days of confident expansion were over. The clock was ticking towards inevitable defeat. In the weeks following the battle, the Americans pressed their advantage. The Marianas fell under occupation, providing critical airfields for B-29 superfortresses. These bombers, capable of reaching Japan's home islands, transformed the war yet again. The sky that Japan had once considered a protective shield was now an arena dominated by American aircraft. Captain Harlow, flying reconnaissance missions over the newly captured islands, felt the shift firsthand. Each flight reinforced the reality that Japan's empire was no longer untouchable. For the pilots, the battle's lessons were etched into memory. Precision, teamwork, and preparation had won the day. Technology had mattered, but but courage and adaptability had been decisive. Harlow often thought of his squadron mates, some lost, others scarred by the day's combat. In letters home, he tried to convey the mixture of fear, relief, and determination that defined their experience. He wrote not of heroics, but of duty, of ordinary men performing extraordinary acts under unimaginable pressure. While the Philippine Sea battle had shifted the military balance, its impact on Japan was deeper than numbers. Civilians began to feel the war closing in. Factories once busy producing aircraft and munitions now faced shortages, while news of destroyed carriers and planes undermined confidence in military leadership. The psychological blow was immense. The enemy they had underestimated could strike anywhere, and the once invincible empire was now vulnerable. Historians later reflected on the significance of this battle. Though overshadowed by events like Midway or D-Day, the engagement in the Philippine Sea was pivotal. It eliminated Japan's ability to project air power effectively, safeguarded the Marianas for Allied use, and paved the way for the final campaigns that would ultimately bring the war to Japan's doorstep. The United States Navy had demonstrated the combined power of technology, training, and strategic foresight. In doing so, they had changed the course of history in a battle few outside the Pacific theater even knew by name. Amidst the operational aftermath, human stories emerged. Sailors rescued pilots who had ditched in the sea. Pilots recounted acts of heroism, from carrying wounded comrades to leading inexperienced flyers through perilous skies. Letters and journals reveal moments of quiet reflection, the terror of flak, the exhilaration of victory, and the sorrow for lives lost. These personal accounts remind us that behind every tactical maneuver were men and women confronting fear, making split-second decisions, and shaping history with each choice. Months later, the full implications became clear. The U.S. could now launch strategic bombing missions directly on Japan. B-29s from the Marianas began targeting industrial centers and eventually Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The chain of events that started in the Philippine Sea had directly contributed to bringing the war to an end. The sky that once had been a domain where Japan had believed itself untouchable had become a path for liberation and a reminder of human ingenuity and resilience. For veterans like Harlow, the victory was bittersweet. Friends had been lost, and the devastation witnessed would never fade. Yet there was pride in knowing that their courage, preparation, and teamwork had made a tangible difference. They had turned the tide of war not with sheer force alone, but with discipline, intelligence, and the willingness to face impossible odds. The Philippine Sea battle may remain unknown to many, its name barely spoken outside military circles, yet its consequences were profound. It demonstrated that empires built on confidence and early victories could be undone by innovation, strategy, and human resolve. The U.S. Navy's triumph was not merely a tactical win. It was a turning point that set the stage for the final collapse of Japan's empire. In quiet moments, the surviving pilots would recall the sky over the Philippine Sea. The roaring engines, the tracer fire, the burning planes falling into the endless ocean. They remembered the camaraderie, the fear, and the surreal beauty of the dawn that followed. History may not widely remember the name of the battle, but those who were there carried its memory forever. A testament to courage, strategy, and the profound impact of a single decisive moment. The ocean that had once carried Japan's ambitions now reflected the dawn of their defeat. And above it, in the vast blue sky, the United States had claimed supremacy, not through arrogance, but through preparation, skill, and relentless determination. The battle that changed everything, but no one knew its name, had been fought, and history had shifted in its wake.